I think there were a number of highlights, and they really revolve around some of the key drivers. One of the key drivers, obviously, is that there are more connections. So we're seeing growth in terms of 10 billion connections by 2016. That's 8 billion personal or handheld devices, as well as 2 billion additional machine-to-machine connections. So the devices or connections, if you will, are actually growing faster than the population. The United Nations has suggested that we'll have a world population of about 7.3 billion by 2016. So that's 1.4 connections per capita. So that I think was number one. Number two is really the device diversification. So by 2016, we're going to see tablets and handsets or smartphones really overtake laptops as the number one and two drivers of traffic on mobile networks. And right now, laptops are really what's driving it. So I think those two things in particular were pretty big news to me. We see them all obviously as cellular technologies, and within the mobile data traffic forecast, that's really what we're focused on is cellular traffic. We look at Wi-Fi separately as part of our fixed forecast. We do look at Wi-Fi from an offload perspective. But in terms of 4G in its particular breakout, just one data point, today 4G represents about 0.2 or less than 1% of all cellular connections, and it's driving about 6% of the traffic. But by 2016, it'll be 6% of all connections and driving 36% of the traffic. So in a very short period of time, 4G is really going to transform the mobile landscape, and the devices it'll support and the way we'll use the mobile network will change as well. When you're talking about mobile, different regions, mature markets, emerging markets, they're all going to grow a little bit differently. So for example, the Middle East and Africa, according to our forecast, is the fastest growing. Asia Pac will generate the most amount of traffic. So Asia Pac generating obviously having the largest population will generate about 40% of the mobile data traffic, and China alone will generate about 10% of the world's mobile data traffic by 2016. But to answer your question, I think it's going to change over time, and the emerging markets can go straight to 4G technologies, whereas a lot of the mature markets have got 2G, 3G, 3.5G infrastructures that legacy infrastructures, if you will, that they'll need to rotate or deal with in some way, shape, or form. So kind of an interesting way that different regions will react or deploy 4G.
Yes, well, tablets has been a big trend for us that has caused us to increase our traffic estimates for both the current year and for 2016. So last year we were expecting that the 2011 growth would be 131%. It actually was more like 133%. And we also had to increase our estimates for 2015 and 2016, partially due to tablets. That's taken off, I think, faster than most analysts have expected. Yes, absolutely. That's another important finding, is that the devices, smartphones are becoming more media-centric and more tablet-like. And tablets are very media-centric and can do most of what a laptop can do in terms of media consumption. So you see that whereas today there's really no comparison between a laptop's consumption and a handset's consumption, by 2016 they'll get much closer together. And you'll have a laptop, average laptop usage in 2016 is about 7 gig per month. The average smartphone usage will be 2.5 gig per month. It'll catch up, and tablet usage will be about 4 gig per month. So you see a convergence of these devices, really centered around media consumption. Yes. So to understand that, we did a supplemental study where we worked with usage data from two Tier 1 providers over the last 2 years. And at the beginning of the study, the top 1% of the users consumed over 50% of the monthly data traffic. And over the 2 years, the percentage is now 24%. So to understand that further, we looked at the difference between the consumption in tiered pricing versus unlimited plans. And we found that over the 2-year period, the difference in consumption
was a threefold at the beginning of the study, and now is about twofold. So the amount of megabytes per month consumed is actually getting narrower and narrower, showing an overall increase in usage by all plans. Also, interesting takeaway was that the top 1% is truly actually the top 5%. So for example, if you're looking at a user base of 1,000 users, 10 users would belong to the top 1%, but actually over a period of 1 year, it is actually 50 users, and the 10 users rotate through the 50 user list, depending on that month's application usage, any key video trends, and such.
Yes, very interesting considering the machine-to-machine device proliferation on the mobile network. We see that reaching about 2 billion devices by 2016, and correspondingly we see the traffic also accelerating through the forecast period, growing at an 86% CAGR into the 2016 timeframe. So a sizable number of devices on the network and generating increasing amounts of traffic flow. There are interesting dynamics at play for the service providers to take into account. I think that's where the dynamics and the differentiation comes into play, because you see some of the low-level kind of traffic generating type applications, essentially, monitoring and batch type data traffic flows. But increasingly, M2M is also being used, obviously, for surveillance, for healthcare type applications, where much more bandwidth is required at a much faster connection speed. So within the M2M category, you're seeing some prioritization potentially of the lower layer traffic flows going to 2G, 3G, and then migrating those higher bandwidth capacity type applications into the 4G network and that spectrum.
Yes, the methodology. So we have direct data that we measure at the network level, at the device level, and we also measure network speeds. And we use that to validate our main methodology, which is based, first of all, on analyst inputs for connections, users, devices, and on top of that we layer the minutes of use and the megabytes per minute. So we triangulate between multiple sources. Once we get the results of the model, we then cross-check that with the data that we get from the panel, for instance, which will tell us how much data a tablet user is using, as well as a smartphone. And we'll look at then the overall network growth rates, which we measure from service providers who share their data with us.